All right. Welcome, everybody. It is Thursday night for those on YouTube. For those that are going to be listening on the podcast, it's whatever day that we publish us. And this will get cut off anyway because it's the very beginning. So, welcome, everybody. This is the inaugural, this is the freshman season of the Devy Hour. This is going to be our way to dive deeper into college players, into what will be the future stars of the NFL, hopefully. We will be talking all things college football players, and the preparation that goes into scouting these guys, what that looks like, some of the guys that we like. We're going to be digging into all that. This will be a weekly live stream and weekly podcast show. So if you miss us on Thursday night on YouTube, you can always watch it later or download the podcast on your favorite podcast platform when we get it there. So I'm excited. This is fun. This is good stuff because this is the work that goes into making sure that you've got the superstars of tomorrow when you do all your rookie scouting. We are going even further back, so we will help you get ready for whatever you're going to do. We are currently a two-man duo. We will have some guests. We have some amazing folks lined up that are going to come on and talk Devy with us in the future. But this is a first episode. This is the basics of what a Devy League is. We figured we didn't need, an entire group of people to talk about a Devy League. So with that being said, I am Brad Menendez at RotoHeat Brad over on Twitter. You also know this silky smooth voice from our Monday night IDP show. And as well as my silky smooth voice, you also hear Paul Veldboom, who is also on our IDP show. Paul, how you doing tonight, brother?
Outside of the technical issues that we had 5 minutes ago, and outside of thankfully work being over this week, life's going pretty good. Life's going good.
Ready for a 3-day weekend for the 4th of July. That is for sure. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what a Devy League is, kind of the basics, roster sizing, how do you fit this into your league, how do you talk the owners into your league to be crazy enough to do what we're doing. And if you have questions, shoot them over on our Facebook community or on YouTube, wherever you're watching. We'll get to them at the end of the episode, and we will definitely make sure you get them answered. If you're listening to this after the fact and you want your questions answered live, well, join us Thursday nights, 9:30 Eastern time. You know you want to. It's a good time. So with that being said, what's a Devy League? Paul, I'll let you start off, seeing as I talked for the first 3 to 5 minutes. Start us off on what a Devy League is.
Devy League is you select college athletes early before they hit the NFL. Devy is you owning Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, CeeDee Lamb, Judy. 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It is a really fun way to separate skill from luck, and also on the other end of it, you don't feel like there's a lot of skill when you miss, and it's not the same as looking at Ronald Jones when you have 2.5 years of tape on him and he doesn't work out. I mean, we don't know these for sure, but it's completely different when you look at someone in high school and go, here's an NFL player. And you can somewhat tell, but it's a new level of fun. We do the IDP show. What is that? It's a new way to have fun with it, and it can be super frustrating. Debbie's the same thing.
Yep.
Just taken to the offensive side versus the defensive side like we do Mondays.
Well, and the interesting thing, and the thing that I love about IDP or Devy or any of these other formats is it's trying to make fantasy football deeper, more engaging. For those of us that do all these things, it's because we really enjoy or love football. We want to go further and further. I watched college football. I enjoyed Saturdays sitting down watching college football. So it made sense to go a little bit deeper when it came to fantasy football. And, I'm already watching these guys anyway. Why not get involved in some other way? Now, some of the nuts and bolts of a Devy league, for those that really don't know anything about Devy, these guys aren't scoring you points. You're drafting these guys believing that their potential to make your NFL roster and then in turn give you fantasy production. If you have or if you add Devy to your already existing fantasy league, you most likely are not going to be getting any points out of these guys. You're going to be drafting guys that you really like Paul said, the Akers, Lambs, Judys of the world. You're drafting them 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years potentially before they ever get to your roster and ever make you fantasy relevant. From the nuts and bolts side of things, also, these leagues aren't run the same as your typical MFL or Flea Flicker or Yahoo or any of the platforms you use. You're probably got a Google Doc or a Microsoft Excel doc that have the rosters and all the players, things like that. And the thing that I like about doing some of these things offline is that you can do more with it. You can analyze what the league is doing when it comes to players they're drafting. In one of the very deep leagues that I'm in, some of the guys are analyzing, what classes guys are coming from to see kind of which classes are getting more action from the owners who are drafting players. It gives you an added level. If you're crazy and like to do statistics, you can absolutely go deeper. That being said, there is a lot more administrative side of it. So if you're the guy that's the commissioner of the league, there's a lot more to it than just everybody goes on MFL and runs their team or Flea Flicker and runs their team. You have to go onto that sheet and keep track of it, make sure guys aren't drafting other guys that somebody already owns. There's so much gatekeeping that you have to do that it is a lot extra work, but in the end, it can be a whole lot more fun because you're adding that extra level of depth to your league.
Yeah.
From the admin side, Paul, is there any other items that you want to add to that?
I like the Google Sheet in the leagues that we have. You can simply have a message board, but it's got to be, you have to be able to edit it, not just say, okay, this guy's owned by this team, because otherwise, if they trade that asset, you have to be able to switch that somehow. Also on it, there are 2 ways that you can, and also I wouldn't recommend having a league now switch over. You either want, it's almost like Superflex. You want to either say, okay, this league's going to be Superflex and we start fresh. This league's going to be Devy or we start fresh. The only way I would consider it would be if you said, okay, 2 years out or 3 years out, we're going to switch. And there's going to be a lot who listen who go, well, I don't want to sit there for 3 years. Okay, well, then start a new league. But it's really hard because if you suddenly sit there and go, okay, the second round is, let's say I pick normally at the end of the second, and I want one of Antonio Gibson, Van Jefferson, whoever it is, 2 up. Okay, if you sit there and go, okay, the Devy assets are now ranked higher than what the rookies I would select, it's then not fair to say 2 years out we start this, because you've hurt someone unintentionally and you don't want that. The other side of this is there are 2 ways you can have drafts. The first one is any unowned rookie and Devy all in one. The other way is rookies in one, Devy's in the other. I do not like that way just because it feels like it helps the guy who picks first a lot, but I have seen it. I like it as, hey, everyone's all in one pool, you pick them out, and you move on. I found that that's more successful, and everyone feels it's fairer. Or
Yeah, and these are so part of this episode we want as you as the commissioner of your league to know how to prepare and get yourself in the best way, because these are all conversations you have to have. I've been in leagues where you just have a commissioner that just makes the decision, and this is what it is. he doesn't really take anyone else's vote into account, which is fine. If you know the owners in your league better than anybody. If you have a league full of guys that can't make a decision, then don't ask their opinions. Just make the decisions. I'm in other leagues where there's kind of a board of directors where you have 4 or 5 guys that kind of talk about, make the decisions, maybe poll the community of owners and see if it's a conversation that needs to be brought. So as if you're looking to move towards something where you're adding college players into your league. Now, don't get me wrong, these college players, again, I will reiterate, are not scoring you points. This is not college fantasy football. It's guys that are going to be on your roster for NFL fantasy football down the road. You want to make sure that all the owners are on board with the direction that your league is going to go, whether it's converting in a few years, starting brand new. That's what this episode is. We want to make sure that you have all the tools to be successful when you implement or begin a Devy league, because there's a lot of gotchas, if you don't think about it, that are going to come up. We've seen it plenty of times. You don't have the rules spelled out well enough, and you've got one guy that tries to mess with everything. And you want to make sure that you've got everything in order so that there's just not that. You've got all your I's dotted, T's crossed, and all that. That being said, so let's talk about roster sizes. When it comes to now, first you have to decide, if this is 12, 14, 16 teams, that's going to dictate roster sizing as well. We have a league that we're in jointly that has 55-man rosters as well as Devy, and it looks a little different.
Let's go ahead and say that it's 35 for offense and 20 for defense, just so we don't say the waiver wire is completely naked. Let's at least specify that.
So why don't you go into the roster sizes that you've used for Devy and what that looks like?
The smallest I've seen is 2, and by 2 I mean 1 offense and 1 defense. And when Craig said, who is on the Monday show with us, that he was in one like that, I went, okay, that's interesting. The kiddie pool is really small, but I get why you would want. It's like anything else. You want to get your feet wet first. I'd say one of my main leagues, we do 5, and you can have guys anywhere from college freshmen, like they signed their LOI 5 months ago, to anyone who is through their first season in the NFL. I find that one tremendously fun because you get it doesn't completely jack the next year's draft. There's still enough in there where the pool next year, you have enough. And we play one where there's a soft cap of 10, but then you can use 5 for your quote-unquote up roster, and you get to pick 1-5, and you go, all right, we're in the middle of the second round. Like, you have to really balance it. It is more fun hitting on someone in round 5 and just completely deep rosters, but it's not for everyone. How many guys in February where Brad's from Michigan, I'm from Wisconsin, where the snow flies and you go, all right, I'm home from work, let's watch some film. How many guys are you interested in sitting there and going, all right, I'm going to watch him? If you only want to watch the top 20 because you got family commitments, then maybe you want to stick at 2, 3, 4. If you don't have a lot of these commitments, 20, I don't know, and you do maybe a hard cap of 200 for the league or something, so that you don't just axe all the future drafts, that's an option also. But I found a good sweet spots anywhere between 5 to 12-ish. And you go from there. You don't have any requirements on you have to have this or that, but I found that that's a solid number to keep value on the future drafts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, typically I see it anywhere from 5 to 15 total, and I think this again comes back to, you have to determine if your league is full of guys that can handle it or not. If they can't handle it, go little. 2 to 5 is perfectly fine, because it's just like with anything else. You want to, like you said, get your feet wet. When I first started doing IDP, because that's kind of how I stepped into this world. I started with regular, 1 QB league. Then it became Superflex overtime. Then I added IDP overtime. Then Devy. It's all about balancing and being able to handle the growth of your league. Because ultimately what you want to do is you don't want to scare off your owners. Like, you want to have a consistent, active, healthy fantasy league. And part of that is making sure that everybody can handle what's being asked of them. So if you're in a league with guys that are not comfortable, go small, work your way up. The great thing about Dynasty fantasy football is it's going to go for a while. You can always add things in later, especially in Devy. Let's say next year everybody was really good and really solid and having fun with it, and they're like, you know what, we want more. Well, then you vote as a league to add, 2 more spots or 5 more spots, and you add more Devy. As an owner, you have to be prepared to handle what your league can and what your league can't do, and handle the growth of it. Some of it is maybe churning over owners that don't want to do it anymore and they want to move on to something else. That's okay. Just because you have owners now in the league. I mean, I've been in we have a dynasty. My home league has been playing since '99. Terrell Davis was on one of the teams. I know it's been a while. We've played for a long time. We've had plenty of owners over the years. Guys come, guys go. It just is what it is. But make sure that you've got it set in stone. Your rules and your bylaws are laid out clear so that everybody understands. And then every year, if you need to revisit and add more Devy spots, add more Devy spots. The goal isn't to scare people off. The goal is to have fun with it, make it more of a challenge, make it more interesting. Um, the thing that I really enjoy about it, just like with IDP, is it makes me want to watch more on these players. On Sundays, I was watching the games anyway. Then I started watching the defensive side just as much as the offensive side. Once I added in Devy, I started watching, not only was I watching college football, but I was actually watching specific players, pulling up the all 22 or going onto YouTube and just searching for, player name, all snaps. Then you can just see that player specific snaps. It doesn't have to be professional. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a college scout to do Devy. You can just be someone that knows how to use YouTube and watch videos of guys playing college football. I mean, don't let it be overwhelming.
Yes, it is not. It was super hard. It was super hard to find film 5 years ago that wasn't highlights. Now you can find this, and you don't have to be an expert to sit there and go, all right, this guy runs a 4.3, this guy runs a 4.7, he gets a pretty major downgrade. Oh, hey, he runs a 4.5 and he looks pretty smooth. And when the combine happens, you make your adjustments and you move on. But you already have somewhat of a baseline scouting on these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you are looking at your league, and let's say, hey, we're going to start, this league allows draft selections traded for this year and next year only. All right, well, then we're going to start Devy in the 2022 year, and we'll start with 2. Next year we do 3. Next year we do 4. Next year we do 5. And you keep adding 1 a year. That way everyone can kind of get their feet wet, can still get someone. Okay, I traded my 1st, so I went for the ship, but I still have a 5th and a 6th. Okay, you still have someone. They're in theory not going to be as good, but that would be the only way I would play from, hey guys, are you interested in this, versus, hey guys, I know you 5 might be interested, you 5 might, and you 2, yeah, maybe. Ask the 5 and the 2 who are interested, who might be, if they want to just start a new league. It's not that hard on Sunday morning to sit there and go, all right, here's my lineup in League ABC. Because if the 5 who aren't interested in it, that could be. I know you don't. It's not a complete death nail in saying, hey, we're just finding new owners, but that's how they might see it, and you're better off just starting a new league. It's not worth losing friends over it. It's just not worth it in the end.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the cool thing about it is it doesn't have to be a big deal. If you talk to your league and your league isn't going to be interested, don't do it. My home league doesn't do much more than one QB. We still have kickers and defenses. Like, I get that the guys in my home league are not going to be able to handle deep stuff. It took me years to get them to finally add taxi squad positions. It's like, I'm perfectly fine finding a different league to do these other crazy things I want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
When you mention waiver wire, I also want to mention for you guys that are newer to Devy, there's no waiver wire. You draft, and that's
Correct.
it until next year's draft.
Yep.
It's much different in the fact that you have to be more prepared, at least better prepared for that draft because there's no options otherwise. Now, during season, you can always trade those guys that have been drafted, but that leaves a smaller pool size of guys. So in the league that I'm in with Paul and Craig from our Monday show, I traded a lot of my early round assets, but then I wound up trading back into the 4th and 5th round. And I had, I don't know, 3-4 picks in the 5th round, and I had a bunch in the 4th round. And, I'm throwing guys on my Devy squad that I'm intrigued in, but they're younger, younger guys that might be higher star prospects and things like that, So there's a lot of different ways to handle it, but make sure that you get it all together by the draft because otherwise you got to wait till next year's draft. So.
Yep. That's 100%. You cannot add anyone who is not in season. The only way you get a Devy is by having the draft selection or asking the owner who has him, hey, what do you want? These are the only ways you could get them. The same as, hey, I really want Saquon. Oh, you pick 6th? Up. You're done. Like, sorry. Devy's the same way. You either have the selections or don't. Also on that, if you do a combo, and I'll stick with offense only. I would probably do maybe 5 rounds, maybe 4 a year. If you do have defense, maybe you add 1 on there, so that way, and that's if you're doing 5 guys. If you do 10 to 15 for each, I would want 5, maybe 6. I know XFL, we do it only 5. I could see adding a 6th round in there. But you also want to have the guy who gives up his first at least be able to get someone at the end also. It is a fine balance to, okay, how do we hurt the guy who traded all the draft selections versus how do you go, well, does he have anyone? It's a fine line, and I think I've somewhat gotten there, but it's a lot more work than what you might think of just to say, okay, I have a B level T-bone. Is this an A level sirloin steak? Wow, let's find out. It's all a balancing act, the same as, okay, how do you value Julio? Okay, I got Justin Jefferson. All right, well, this guy's older, but he's probably better. Or Devy wise, it's how do you grade? All right, this guy's a junior and he's shown it, but he's maybe a late first, early second, versus how do you value the guy who runs a 3.6 second 40, jumps 80 feet in the air, and he's 250. Like, because you hear the stories every year. This guy runs ridiculously fast. They hit the combine. Nope, not as fast. Oh, this guy runs a 405. Let's see about that. Like, but in some of them, it does end up happening. So it's it's very, very interesting. I
Yeah.
know that's a long-winded answer, but
Well, and the cool thing about it is, you can continue to try and tweak and make changes, and and don't be afraid to, like we've talked about, dip your feet in. You don't have to go quickly into it. Some of the leagues that you've run, it's taken time for you to get it to where it is. There've been changes, you've done modifications, and you have to figure out kind of what's that sweet spot based on your owners, based on your league, based on its setup. There's no right or wrong answer to it. You just try until you find a really good mix that makes your league feel good and right between all the owners. Everybody's kosher and happy with everything. That's important, so don't be afraid to make changes. I mean, that's every year in most of my leagues. I say, okay, is there anybody that's struggling with anything? Do we have any issues? Anything we want to talk about? At least these are for the leagues where I know the owners can handle that kind of thing. The leagues where I just make the decisions and go, it is what it is. So, that being said, so we talked about, so Paul talked about valuing Julio based on a guy like Justin Jefferson. Definitely allow trading between players in the league and Devies and future picks and things like that.
yep.
It makes it more difficult because some guys see things differently. I may value an NFL prospect way more than a Devy prospect, or I may value the draft pick more than than the NFL player. I mean, this is where the conversation has to happen. You have to have good open dialogue with all of your owners so that you can work those trade wires and things like that. So, it's one of those things where if you're in a Devy league, you have to be on top of things. And I apologize, there's fireworks going off, so my dogs are going crazy.
As far as a who can be dealt, think of how baseball operates. They will trade such and such of player who's going to help you win now for someone that 90% of the fan base has never heard of, but is some all superstar college athlete, yada yada yada. The same way you can trade them in season um, for help now. It's honestly no different than moving your first next year. Oh, I have DeAndre Swift, but I don't have my first next year. Well, he kind of is your first next year. You're just basically converting apples to apples and hoping that you have more apples at the end of the process. That's all
Absolutely.
it really is.
Absolutely. So, that being said, the only other items that we really need to make sure that you're thinking about as an administrator is obviously we've mentioned no waiver wires in Devy, but you still have your typical waiver wires and everything else. You can set the rest of the league up almost very, very typical, like you would anything else. Just make sure that people understand how waiver wires work, how the trading works. These are all things that you want to clearly define in your bylaws so that everybody understands. And ultimately, what we're telling you, and we're not trying to scare you with this. Ultimately, what we're telling you is make sure you've just got everything set up prior to the start of your league or prior to the start of adding Devy, because it's going to help make things smooth for everybody if everybody understands how it goes, what's expected of them, and what they can and can't do.
Also, on the other end, we missed one very obvious thing. If you do have Devy, make sure you have a taxi squad, and it doesn't have to be necessarily college only. But let's say your taxi squad is college freshmen through the end of their first year, maybe even end of the second year in the NFL. They can stay on there the whole way through, and you can draft them any way or any time in there. But once they're off the taxi squad, they're off. And the only exception is in MFL if you trade for one off of somebody else's, then you can put them on. But other than that, once they're up, they're up.
Absolutely.
Just another piece of administration that I can see someone pulling, but
Mm-hmm.
Once they're up, they are up, and
There's no going
and
back.
that's that. Yeah, and that's that.
Yeah, and it's important, and I would say for those of you that are new, that this is the first time you've listened or watched, like, subscribe, find us wherever we're at. You've got my Twitter handle below at RotoHeat Brad. Paul is one of our Facebook community admins. You can find him over in our RotoHeat Facebook community. He's over there posting gifts and having a good time with everybody, and we're both here to help. So if you're setting up your Devy League and you have questions, definitely reach out. I get people sliding into the DMs all the time asking questions, and whether it's trade advice or league setup advice, that's what we're here to do. RotoHeat.com is a group of people that are trying to help you be successful and make it fun for everybody. So
I agree.
that's important. Enjoying this is ultimately a game. As much as people make money off of this and everybody is in it for different reasons, in the end, it's just a game. That's all it is.
Correct.
It's Dungeons and Dragons for guys that don't want to read a giant book about Dungeons and Dragons but would rather watch football.
That is 100% accurate. It is nerd games for guys who like sports. It is really no different than that.
It is.
I mean, it's like walking into your favorite bar or whatever, and you try hitting on the waitress, "Hey, Dungeons and Dragons? Hey, I do Devy and IDP. What the heck is that?" It's the same thing. It is nerd level stuff for guys who like sports. That's all it is.
That's it. So all of that being said, so now we've touched on all the administrative side of things. Next, I want to peel back the curtain a little bit on some of what we've talked about when it comes to evaluating players. So this looks a little different for everybody. So if you're a guy that goes to your local bookstore, there'll be books. You can get, Lindy's and some of those other guys. They will give you an entire book of college football information, published at a specific time, not real time, not up to date, obviously, but it's at that time it's as up to date as it can be. You can do things like that, so you can start reading about, they'll break down the different college rosters and talk about coaches and coaching staffs. You can go over to YouTube. You can go to 247 Sports or Rivals. You can go to the Draft Network if you're looking for like draft focus type coverage. There's a lot of different ways to get information. Typically what I do, and I'll let Paul talk kind of a little bit through his process. What I do is I have a Google Doc set up of guys that and I break it up into different tabs. Guys that feel like I've got a good evaluation on, so I feel like I'm comfortable where I'm at with them and I'm not going to dig into them too much more. I've got a tab of guys that I'm looking into more and a tab of guys that I need to look into more. And as I go through them, I kind of move them around from tab to tab. But I use all the different things. Typically, I go to YouTube and I'll just type a player's name and look all snaps. And then that gives me the ability, and I'm not saying highlight reels. Do not watch highlight reels. They're not going to give you an accurate representation of the player. They're going to give you big plays, stuff that looks good on tape. I want to see everything. I want to see a receiver if he's willing to block down the field, if he can handle, getting off coverage, using his hands to get separation, if he's got big playability. I want to see those things every play, even if he isn't getting the ball. I want to see if a running back is going to do pass protection or if he's just going to let the quarterback get blown up by a linebacker. All those things. Typically, I'll start and use mostly YouTube videos. I will try to find other avenues to watch film in that aspect. I will look at things like the Draft Network and other places that I know scouting people reside because those guys are in there. They're paid to do what I enjoy doing for free. So you have to kind of use a lot of different avenues, and I would recommend that you have some sort of cheat sheet, even if it's just a pad of paper that you're scribbling stuff on. Keep track of what you see on pieces of paper or on film. Keep track of it. Some of our folks on YouTube said eye test. Eye test is important. Yeah, Paul's show sheet is a pad of paper and written notes.
Google Docs right here, baby. Right here.
Google Docs for the pen and paper generation.
Right.
So it's important to make sure you keep those notes and keep updating them. I remember watching film of Cam Akers, and I'm using Cam Akers because he's a guy that most of you, if you don't do Devy, You now know because he's in your leagues. I remember doing Camp Makers review years and years ago and not being the biggest fan. But it wasn't, I didn't really understand. It was more so Florida State's terrible offensive line than the player itself. The player wasn't terrible. He just was, he didn't have much to work with. So that being said, Paul, talk a little bit about what you do when you're evaluating college players.
I got to hit one thing first. That reminds me of when I scouted Donovan Peoples-Jones, someone you guys probably should know also. He started off as the exact same as Akers, upper 5 athlete. Um, hey, this guy's in high school. He's going to make the NFL, yada, yada, yada. And you just watch him. Okay, high school film. And yes, you shouldn't watch highlights. When you're watching high school film, that's all you get. I'm sorry, it's all you get. If I could find, hey, go to this site. If it's ours or not, I'll plug them. You can't find anything except highlights for high school kids. I'm sorry, it is what it is. But other than that, okay, hey, I liked this guy last year. I liked him this year. I liked him as an upperclassman. Okay, let's see what he does. But part of the process for me is sitting there and going, okay, I like Donovan Peoples-Jones. I didn't like him here. I didn't like him here. Okay, what happened? What's the story behind it? And you have to figure it out. Was it an injury thing? Was it, well, FSU's offensive line was not the best? Was it Harbaugh's offensive mind was not the best? What actually happened? And is there something that's explainable, or is the kid not working hard? And you'll have stories where the kid doesn't work hard, and you'll see guys who were top 20 in 247 rivals. They go round 7, they go undrafted, and they didn't get hurt or anything. It's just they didn't work at it. And you have to keep, and I know I have the pen and paper method, but you have to keep updating it and go, okay, I liked it. Okay, year 1 was a 8, year 2 9, year 3 was this, or however you're going to score it, and just sit there and go, okay, the story says this, and you have a more accurate eval at the end versus just watching 1 year of tape and going, all right, well, he was an 8.5 his last year for me. Okay, well, what does that mean? The story's more than that. And that's where the real fun is in this process for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that you have to, as a person who's been doing Devy for a few years now, and been an avid fan from the moment I started doing it, you have to look at the entire picture of a player. You have to understand the scheme that they're in. You have to understand, obviously, like you mentioned, their positives, their negatives. When you're looking at the individual, there's things you're not going to be able to find out. You're not going to be able to find out character. Unfortunately, the only things you hear about a player's character is when they get in trouble, so it's negatives. So some of those things. This is why following guys on Twitter is important. Some of those scouts, some of the different guys that are very chatty on Twitter, because you'll see things on the tea leaves. And being a part of a Devy league, or being somebody who's deeper into Devy, it takes looking at a lot of different places to get information. So on my Google Docs, I have, I'll put like kind of a notes column that's just a catch all of my random thoughts, whether it's something I saw somebody say on Twitter that I put in there, so I can just kind of keep track about what other people are saying. I use it all to kind of build, like you said, this full picture of the player himself. Looking at, I mean, as a Michigan guy, DPJ and Tariq Black, like when they were coming into Michigan, you'd have thought they were like the second coming. Like, this duo is going to be the greatest thing ever, and it just didn't work out. But then you start to peel back the layers. Okay, well, Tariq Black was hurt every year he was at Michigan. DPJ was getting the ball thrown to him by terrible quarterbacks. So you start to build this picture like, okay, what part of it is the player, what part of it is the scheme, what part of it is the the players around him, and then as you build this picture, then in the end you have to decide, do I want this player on my roster? There's guys that I've drafted on my roster that and in full disclosure, the league that I am in with Paul and Craig, I picked up an orphan. Well, that orphan had a specific guy named Tyree Cleveland on the team. I'm not a fan of him. He was already on the roster. He somehow made it up to my NFL roster, and he becomes droppable because he's just, he's buried on a depth chart. I didn't like the player, had no interest in him. The guy before me drafted. Those things you just have to be okay with sometimes. Sometimes you get stuck in a situation where you have a player you're not interested in. Drop him. And if you have a player you are interested in and he just turns out to be trash, drop him. Like, don't, just because you drafted him doesn't mean you need to keep him forever. If he's not any good, he's not any good. And that's that's why you have to keep building this profile and keep reevaluating and reevaluating. Paul, it looks like you're about to explode. You go ahead and talk.
I drafted Adrian Martinez last year. For those of you who don't know, he's about 6'5", 240, looks like Cam Newton. Unfortunately, some of his aspects, he plays like Cam Newton, and he can't throw the ball accurately at all. But one of the things that we're not mentioning as an overall is we're looking for talent. Yes, you would hope your wide receiver can run routes. You are hoping that he can catch. You're hoping that your running back can see. You're hoping that the quarterback can throw the ball to not the defender. I'm a Jameis Winston fan, never mind. But you're hoping, you have to have requisite talent in the NFL. When you're watching college, all of the guys you're going to watch are going to be better than their opponents on 80 to 90% of the plays, and it might be 100. They're all going to be better. But when you're in the NFL, you need a minimum talent threshold. You're not going to be a 4.8 running back in the league. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. So we're looking for talent and just hoping the other stuff works its way out. And it seems obvious, but you don't know, and the experts, they don't know if the guy who Rivals ranked as the 35th best running back, but he kind of looks decent his first year, but he plays at some school where they don't have anything in front of him, is better than the guy who was ranked first or second, but he sat the year because of an injury or because the guy in front of him went in the NFL draft. And I'm sorry, but you're just not playing over that at most of the schools where these top 50 overall prospects are. You're just not going to see the field. But you're looking for talent first, second, and third, and just hoping that they don't get hurt along the process. You're hoping that they don't find weed and they don't do anything else. You're hoping that they don't get into criminal issues. You're hoping that they don't have attitude issues. In some of it you do know, but some of it you don't, even if you follow everyone you can conceivably follow, and you're just hoping it works out at the end. Yes, I drafted Cam Akers when he was in high school still. I look really smart. I drafted Adrian Martinez last year, and he's off my team before he ever leaves the school. Because of the fact that you're looking for divas, you're going to look dumb a lot more often than even, all right, I pick ninth in the rookie draft. What's the hit rate on this? 30%, maybe 40%. You start doing Devy, your hit ratio is going to go down a lot. just because there are so many other issues that can happen, and you don't think that they happen, and then you watch a full season and you go, Weed, ACL, and he never plays again, and I'm sorry, and you're sitting there as an owner thinking, okay, you put your hands in the air, you move on. You have to accept the fact that your hit rate is not going to be nearly as high. But again, that's the nature of, all right, I want NFL talent, or it doesn't matter anyways.
Oh, and when you're evaluating a player, you can't just look at numbers statistically. If you're looking at, say, smaller mid-major colleges, you're looking to see stats probably do matter a little bit more. If you're looking at smaller school prospects, think of like a Corey Davis type. He was drafted real high in the NFL draft, came from a smaller school, dominated. Like, you need to see, if you're in a smaller conference, you need to dominate your competition, because we need to see that talent. And not only do we need to see the talent, we need to see it every week. Some of these bigger prospects, think of some of these guys that it took them a few years to get any playing time. Joe Burrow is a perfect example. Wound up being the number one overall pick, bounced from Ohio State to LSU, and didn't really get any time on the field because there's just so much talent ahead of him that he couldn't get out in front of. Who's he going to beat out? Dwayne Haskins or Fields or any of these guys? No, he wasn't going to do that. So it took time to get there. So that's all part of building the profile of the player. You have to see certain things. If they're in the bigger schools, in the SEC and the Big Ten, things like that, and they're not getting on the field, why are they not getting on the field? Is it because they're at a deep position? If they're coming from a smaller school, why are they so dominant? You got to understand that. So statistics really don't always build you much of a picture, but they play a role. As we talk about what is a Devy League, we also want to help you understand how to prepare for your Devy League. And that being said, these are all part of the overall picture, and that's why you need to have some way to keep track of all this, because this is a lot of information. This is a lot of stuff that you're going to be writing down or tracking in your Google Doc. It's just a lot of information to soak in. That's why it's important to find people that you can trust to get this information from. Over here at RotoHeat.com, we've started building more. We've got a few of us guys write Devy profiles on specific players to help you understand the individual players. Paul and I and some of the other guys are doing Devy rankings, but it's not super deep. It's like 80, 100 players. Think about college football. There's thousands of players. I mean, you got so many players, and depending on how deep your league goes, I'm in one league that I can draft high school players, and I have. It's Devy could be a lot of different things. It is nuts, but it's a fun nuts because it's been a challenge, and that's what I love. So that's all part of what a Devy League is. A Devy League is it's deep, it's in depth, it's challenging, it's interesting. Devy is just another way to make fantasy football more exciting, and that's what I want. The off season shouldn't end, and I don't want it to end. So I do all these other types of leagues to help keep me connected to football in some way, shape, or form.
Devy is more of a grind than what it initially shows. If I said, hey, look at Albert O in March, you sit there and go, okay, this guy should make round 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, whatever you're sitting there and saying. Devy is sitting there and watching 5 guys and then saying, all right, now pick the top 1 and maybe the second guy. You're going to be watching so many guys that ultimately won't end up even in the NFL that you have to sit there and go, there's a minimum talent threshold that you have to have in order to make it. So also on the other end of that is you can't look at the stats. I know we mentioned it before, but you can't sit there and go, okay, this guy had 5,000, this guy had 4,000. Why is it happening? And that's where it's all, hey, does he have talent or not. And like I said, it's going to be 70-80% of the guys that you look at will never sniff the NFL. You'll hear about them in the Canadian League or the XFL if they reform, and that's it. But you won't hear about the other guys. It's a lot more busy work, and once in a while you can tell watching one game on someone, hey, this guy isn't in. All right, move on. On the guys who make it, that's where you do your homework.
Absolutely. And for those that are starting Devy and you're trying to just dip your feet in the water, it's okay to just find a site that you trust and use their rankings to get a feel for who kind of the bigger names are. But then I would still encourage you to look into those guys to make sure you like what you're seeing. Don't be afraid to use somebody else's rankings to get an idea of who you need to look at, especially if you don't have a good foundation, because you're not going to step into this and be a superstar. Like, it's going to take time to learn.
Yep, 100%. I look at 5 to 10 different. I'll just Google Devy rankings, 2022 NFL draft. All right, what does this guy think? Oh, he thinks he's in the first round. All right, what's the reason he thinks he's in the first round? If you see the same thing, hey, you found somebody. But you're going to see a lot of, and it's not necessarily misinformation, but everyone has a guy that they like, that they have an inside information. Everyone has inside information on every player that has ever played and will ever play in the future. There's so much just nonsense out there. Oh, this guy's a sleeper. Everyone's a sleeper. Everyone's a sleeper. You just have to get through the nonsense. And in fairness, look at the NFL draft rankings from April 1st, and then look at them on May 1st. This is with all the information. We're doing it with maybe half the information. So we're just hoping that these guys make the NFL. Not necessarily what they do when they're in the NFL, which, yes, that is the ultimate goal. But we're just looking to get guys in the league. Once they're in the door, it's basically bonus from there. We just want to get enough guys into the dance so that we don't select first in 5 years.
Absolutely. And so as we wrap up what is a Devy League, I would encourage you guys to continue to ask questions. Join our conversations over on Discord. We have an entire Devy channel where we talk just Devy. The Facebook community that I mentioned earlier, that Paul's one of the admins over, we got conversations about Devy players in there. RotoHeat.com, you can find our rankings. You can find our specific profiles. I just dropped one this week about Michigan wide receiver Nico Collins and how I feel about him. We've got all sorts of different profiles of all sorts of different college players. I would encourage you guys to continue asking those questions, and don't be afraid to pose questions in the communities. We want to help share information and help you guys be prepared for your drafts and be prepared for whatever's to come in your fantasy league. This show will be back next week. We're going to be on every Thursday. It'll look a little different, so this was just kind of a overall shotgun shell of what Devy is. After this, we're going to start talking about our top players in the different position categories. We've got some awesome guests lined up. If you've watched our Tuesday night show, one of the guys, Shane Hallam from FakePigskin.com, is going to be on. Him and I have been talking, and I've been trying to get him involved a little bit with our shows because I love talking football with him, and he's an awesome resource. So we'll have him on. I've got some other guests that I'm trying to line up as well. So Paul and I will be having lots of different conversations about college players, how we evaluate them, what we think of them whenever the episode airs. So be back here every Thursday. If you're not here on Thursday, these will be on YouTube, or you can find our podcast on any of your major platforms. So until next week, that was